I wanted to ask, have you ever been caught doing something that you weren't supposed to do? Generally speaking, ever been caught doing something you weren't supposed to do? Like, I know my brother, he's not here today, thankfully, but I remember he caught me once stealing snacks and sweets from his room. My mother also caught me once stealing a whole handful of gummy bears. I thought she went to the shops and she didn't, and she was standing in front of me like, oh, how do I get out of it? It's so embarrassing when that happens, when you're caught. Did you ever have a secret or a hidden agenda, a hidden plan, and somebody exposed it? Maybe you shared the secret with one person and then he shared it with everybody. It's like, oh, how come you share this with everybody? It's supposed to be a secret, right? And then you feel exposed and it's awkward and it's embarrassing. And psychologists call this the fear of disclosure. The fear of disclosure is when you are afraid to be caught, when you are afraid to be found out. I think Jesus was aware that this is a fear that everybody had. And he was aware that also his opponents had that fear, the Pharisees and all of them. And I think he had fun. Exposing their hidden agenda to the public through a parable that he told. We are in a series, as Daniel was saying, through the book of the Gospel of Mark, and we call it All Eyes on Jesus. And today we are going to be in chapter 12, where Jesus head-on confronts his opponents. Jesus had all kinds of people, there were all kinds of groups of people that actually were really triggered by Jesus. They didn't like Jesus. They were jealous of his popularity. They disagreed with what he was teaching and doing. And also they were afraid of his influence. They're all listed. There are different groups of people. There's the Pharisees, there are the Sadducees, there are scribes, there are the Herodians. The interesting thing is in chapter 12, they're all kind of coming together and the heat is on, okay? It's now a few days before Jesus is going to be arrested in the story in Jerusalem. Last week we looked at how Jesus arrived in Jerusalem and now he's confronting these people in power. The interesting thing is that these groups actually, on all other topics, they didn't see eye to eye with each other. Some of them, they actually hated each other. The Pharisees, for example, they were more the conservative moral purity party. And then there were the Herodians. They were the ones who got power from the Romans. They were very secular. Also Herod, when Jesus was born, he had all the babies killed under 2 years old. Like they were the baby murderers. Okay, that's what the Herodians and the Pharisees and the Herodians, they hated one another because the Pharisees were saying, the Herodians, you guys are compromisers. But here, even though they hated each other, they hated Jesus more than they hated one another. And so it's kind of like a bipartisan effort. They team up together to confront Jesus and to get to Jesus, ultimately with the plan to kill Jesus, which they had accomplished, as you know the story, right? So here is this confrontation, and Jesus, in this confrontation, he tells a story, a parable, as he often did, and this parable is quite exposing. He's bringing to light their hidden agenda, okay? Before we look at the parable, we need to know what happened in this story. So before we go to chapter 12, let's go quickly back to chapter 11, where these oppositions, the enemies of Jesus, if you will, where they are challenging Jesus. And in chapter 11, verse 28, they come to him, they challenge him with a question on the screen here as well. They demanded, Jesus, by what authority are you doing all these things? Who gave you the right to do them? In other words, they were saying, Jesus, you just arrived here in Jerusalem. You are a new player in town. Who sent you? Who commissioned you? Who gave you this authority? That's a fair question, you might think. And ultimately, any other rabbi, the expected answer would be that you kind of pull out your CV. Here are my degrees. Here are my credentials. Here is the rabbi that I was taught by, that I studied under. Here is all the scriptures that I memorized. I'm reciting them to you. And kind of the more quotes you can point to, the more sources you can point to, the more authority you can claim. Back then, okay? It's kind of like, the more sources you have, the more authority you have. So it's kind of like university today. It's all about, the modern academia, it's all about the art of quoting other sources. And you know you've made it when you can quote yourself. Just like, yes, this is what I thought, and I'm quoting myself, right? But that was the answer that they had expected, but Jesus doesn't play their game with them. He turned the question around and asked them a question. He says, okay, you want to talk about authority? Let's talk about the authority of John the Baptist. Remember, we met him in chapter 1. This was months ago, but when we were starting the series, John the Baptist, and he says, by what authority do you think John the Baptist did his ministry? Was it by heaven's authority or was it man's authority? And he says, answer me this and then I'll tell you where I got my authority from. And now they put their heads together and we read in verse 31, they talked it over among themselves. They said, well, if we say it was from heaven, John the Baptist's authority was from heaven, he will ask us why we didn't believe John. Oh, this is awkward. But if we dare say it was merely human, do we dare say it was merely human? For they were afraid, it says, of what the people would do because everyone believed that John was a prophet. Okay? So they were afraid of the crowd, and so they replied to Jesus, we don't know. We don't know. And you see how they're trying to back off, how they're trying to get out of it, how they're trying to actually stay neutral, how they're so afraid of the crowd, they don't want to anger the crowd. And they're not interested in truth, they're interested in safety. Not truth, but safety. They just want to play it safe. But this kind of spineless neutrality doesn't go well with Jesus, because Jesus knows they are not neutral. So now he goes on the offensive. He goes to attack them. He goes after them. He wants to ambush them. He wants to confront them. He wants to expose their hidden agenda. And that's why he tells this parable that we're going to look at today. And it's a weird one, okay? This is one of those parables that doesn't really have a happy end, because everyone's dead at the end, okay? The other parables, like the prodigal son, it's like, it's sad, but then there's a barbecue at the end. And I was like, okay, yeah, we can do a barbecue, right? And, or the woman with the lost coin, like she finds her coin, like she's happy at the end. But here, everybody's dead. It's like one of those, what are we going to do with this story? Let me read it to you. Some of you may have read it before. We are now in chapter 12. Starting in the first verse, it's also on your piece of paper on your seat, or you can read along on the screen. It says, then Jesus began teaching them with stories. He says, a man planted a vineyard. He built a wall around it, dug a pit for pressing out the grape juice, and built a lookout tower. Then he leased the vineyard to tenant farmers and moved to another country. Now, to us, for people in Berlin, this seems a bit foreign because we don't really see lots of vineyards in the city. But for the people back then, basically they lived in a vineyard, right? There's vine everywhere. So they knew about this image, and also they knew about this practice that people owned those farms, but other people worked the farms, and maybe the people who owned them didn't even live there, and they lived in another town, another country even. So that was all common. But also for the religious people who were listening, they also knew this image, because Jesus, for this parable, he was borrowing an image from the Old Testament, from Isaiah chapter 5. No doubt those people listening, those are biblical scholars, they would have taught on this passage. They might have even memorized it. They knew exactly what Jesus was talking about, because it's almost the same thing. In Isaiah chapter 5, you can read it at home, but Isaiah chapter 5 talks about God planting a vineyard. And that vineyard is the people of Israel, God's holy people. Almost always in the Old Testament, whenever there's a vineyard, it's a picture for God's people, God's chosen nation, okay? And it says that in Isaiah chapter 5, it says that God, he prepared the soil, he threw away the stones, and he planted the best seed, and almost like he prepared everything in a way that those farmers could just come in and have a fruitful harvest. It was the perfect conditions for a good vineyard, okay? And now Jesus comes and he says, this vineyard that God has planted actually has been entrusted to farmers, to tenant farmers. And he's saying, you guys, the religious leaders of the nation, you are those tenant farmers. God has entrusted his people to your care, so you make sure that they do well. So you make sure that they actually thrive and flourish. Make sense? A little bit? Okay, let's see what happens. And so he moved to another country, and it says, at the time of the grape harvest, He sent one of his servants to collect his share of the crop. But the farmers grabbed the servant, beat him up, and sent him back empty-handed. It's like, what kind of parable is this, Jesus? Wow. Then the owner sent another servant, but they insulted him and beat him over the head. The next servant he sent was killed. Others he sent were either beaten or killed until there was only one left to send. It was his son whom he dearly loved. The owner finally sent him, thinking, surely they will respect my son. But the tenant farmers said to one another, here comes the heir to his estate. Let's kill him and get the estate for ourselves. So they grabbed him, the son, and they murdered him and threw his body out of the vineyard. And now Jesus asked this question, what do you suppose the owner of the vineyard will do? I'll tell you what he will do. He will come and kill those farmers and lease the vineyard to others. And then he says, didn't you ever read the scriptures? Guys, that's just a slap in the face for those people who claim to know their Bibles. Like they were the scholars, they memorized the Bible, right? For them to be Pharisees, they actually had to quote the entire thing. And he goes to them like, haven't you ever read the scriptures, guys? It's bold. And now he's quoting a verse from the Old Testament, from the Psalms, Psalm 118, where it says, the stone that the builders rejected has now become the cornerstone. And you're thinking, hold on, is that another parable now? Is he changing metaphors? What is this? And I had to actually, when I looked upon, when I came across this, I thought it was very fascinating that there is actually in Hebrew, this is a play on words, because there's the word for son, the son that was rejected and killed. The word for son is the word Ben, where we get Benjamin from, right? The word for stone is the word Eben. Maybe you know the word Ebenezer or something, like that's stone, a rock, okay? So Jesus is actually playing on the words here. Hey, you threw away the son, you threw away the stone, the son that the builders rejected, the stone that the builders, see what's happening? The stone that the builders rejected, he has become the cornerstone. You read that scripture, haven't you? And he says, this is what the Lord is doing, and it is wonderful to see. That's the end of the quote, that's the end of the parable. And then it just says the religious leaders wanted to arrest Jesus because they realized he was telling the story against them. They were the wicked farmers. But also, again, they were afraid of the crowd. Again, they wanted safety more than truth. Afraid of the crowd, so they left him and went away. Weird, isn't it? Weird story. There's been a murder in the vineyard, guys. A body had been found outside on the other side of the hedge. And this murder is actually revealing to us some shocking truths that I want to talk to you today about. This parable is maybe the most confrontational parable that Jesus shared. And I think he's exposing here, he's bringing to light three important truths for us to think about. But I must admit, I was struggling this week with this message because it's just so brutal, isn't it? It's just so, like, Jesus really, like, can we not think of another parable, or can I not preach again on Palm Sunday? Like, for last week, that was nice. It was, the mild, meek Jesus on a donkey, Hosanna. That was a nice, comfortable message, right? Wasn't it? And here you think if there's a donkey in this story, they would slaughter the donkey as well. Like everybody dies. It's so gory, and it's so confrontational, and it's so such an affront. This whole parable is such an insult to the people who were listening. It actually is supposed to make us feel a bit uncomfortable. Jesus was saying to these religious leaders, he was saying to them, you guys have been entrusted to tend to the vineyard. God has blessed you so you can be a blessing to his people. You were supposed to lead them well. So you were supposed to ensure their harvest, their fruit. You were supposed to ensure that they flourish and thrive. But what have you done? What have you done? You have beaten all the messengers that he sent to you. You have basically showed him your cold shoulder. You've turned from him. You have not honored the Lord of the vineyard, the owner of the vineyard. You have killed all the prophets that he sent to you. And really what this story is, this parable is sort of a picture. Jesus is retelling the story of the people of Israel, of the leaders of Israel, with how they treated all the prophet and all the messengers that God sent to them over the centuries. We know that Elijah, by the authorities, he was casted into the wilderness. Isaiah, the prophet, he was sawn in two. That's how he died. Zechariah, he was stoned to death. John the Baptist, he was beheaded. It's quite cruel. Actually, in the book of Hebrews, New Testament, there's a couple of verses that talks about how all these prophets in the past, that kind of what fate they had to face. It says in Hebrews 11 on the screen here, it says some of these prophets, they died by stoning, some were sawed in half, and others were killed with the sword. Some went about wearing skins of sheep and goats, destitute and oppressed and mistreated. Look at this, they were too good for this world. But here's how you treated them. They were wandering over deserts and mountains, hiding in caves and holes in the ground. And all of this because, according to Jesus' parable, the spiritual leaders of Israel did not want to share the fruit of the harvest. They wanted to keep it for themselves. And guys, this is a haunting warning for any one of us in the room who finds themselves in spiritual leadership in one way or another. Maybe in the church, maybe leading a ministry. I know some people here, you work with campus or with YWAM, or maybe even within this church, and you're leading a small group, or you're singing, leading worship, kids ministry. Like, we need to come to terms with what Jesus is saying here, and it should actually, we should feel a shiver going down our spine at this possibility that Jesus says it is possible to do the work of the harvest and at the same time ignore the word of the harvest. You do the work of the Lord, but you ignore the word of the Lord. You push to the side what he's saying. It's possible to be busy in the work in the harvest, but you have zero concern for the owner of the harvest. It's possible for you to serve in the vineyard, but not want to share the fruit of the vineyard. Let me bring it right down. It's possible to lead a small group without loving Jesus. It is possible to stand up here and preach this word without prayer. It is possible to stand here and sing but not worship. That's a tough one. And we should actually, like I said, this possibility should send a shiver down our spines. Like, wow, Lord, help me to get my motivation right. But it isn't just for spiritual leaders. This whole thing, I think what Jesus is exposing here is a pattern that is true for all of us. Underneath, there's a pattern that's true for all of us. Maybe you want to write this down. The first thing that Jesus uncovers is our relenting sense of entitlement. Our unrelenting sense of entitlement. Entitlement is often said, that's a young people's problem. That's an attitude problem that young people have. It's not just young people. All generations struggle with this thing of entitlement. Entitlement says something like, I am freed. I am not obligated to show responsibility. My opinion needs to be heard. My opinion matters more than all the other opinions in the room. I deserve recognition. I deserve appreciation. I deserve a trophy. I deserve a credit. I'm owed special treatment. I deserve the harvest. This is my vineyard. That's entitlement. Like, you're kind of like, I want this to be mine. Let's remember, the farmers here in this story, they were hired by the owner to just work the harvest, to work in the vineyard. But instead, they acted as if the whole thing belonged to them. In verse 7, it says, let's kill the son, and then we'll have the whole estate to ourselves. They were acting, here's what it is, they were acting like owners, but they've been called to be stewards. They acted like owners, even though they were called to be stewards. And they get it confused. And the people back then, I believe they were triggered by Jesus because Jesus, he was disrupting this ownership mentality. And can I just say, that's why we feel uncomfortable with this right now as well. In the 21st century in Berlin, we're triggered by this story because we also have this ownership mentality. Because what is the mantra that you hear all the time in Berlin? The mantra in Berlin is, you are your own boss. You are your own Lord. You live your life. You be as autonomous as possible. Follow your heart, right? Follow your heart. You do your thing. Enjoy your freedom. You do you, boo. Okay. Follow your heart. I've said this before. I believe this advice, follow your heart, is terrible advice. Because the Bible says the heart is deceitful. Okay? You follow your heart, you get yourself in trouble all the time. We lie to ourselves all the time. My heart lies to me all the time. Okay, the Bible says, he who trusts in his own heart is a fool. You trust in your own heart, you're a fool, the Bible says. So what if this advice, follow your heart, what if that's not the solution to our problems? What if that is the root of our problems? That we tend to always follow our hearts and we believe this lie, like, yes, my heart's gonna direct me. And I'm autonomous, and it's entitlement, this whole thing. Like I said, I get myself in trouble all the time when I follow my own heart. It's not new, by the way. It's not new. It's not originated in Berlin. What did the serpent say to Eve, to the woman in the Garden of Eden? What did he say to her? Follow your heart. You can enjoy this garden without God. You can enjoy this vineyard without the owner. You just live your life. You enjoy your freedom. It's the same thing. From age old, it's the same lies we always believe, and we feel entitled. And Jesus is exposing it here. He's exposing our relentless sense of entitlement. And that entitlement, it makes us push God to the side so we can enjoy the harvest for ourselves. In Psalm 10, it says, the one greedy for gain, he curses and renounces the Lord. That's a tough one. He curses and renounces the Lord. That means you so want to be in control. You so want to enjoy the profit and the blessing to yourself that you push God to the side. You want to be owner, not steward. And maybe you're saying, okay, Dave, what do you mean with that? Like, what does that mean for me? I want you to think about everything that God has entrusted to you. So think about it. There's a whole list of things that God has entrusted to you. Your gifts, your time, your energy, your health, your money, your influence, your creativity, your relationships, your connections, your opportunities, the open doors, your ministry. All of these things are entrusted to you. Now here's a good question for you to ask. If God takes it away from you tomorrow, are you okay? If not, you found identity in it. And if you found identity in it, you will protect it. You will guard it. You will mark the territory around it. You will say, this is yours. And anybody who comes and you perceive that person as a threat to that thing that become your identity, you will push him to the side. You will consider murder if he doesn't go. Right? That's how protective we are of the things that we think they keep us alive. And here's the thing, these things, your time, your influence, your relationships, your creativity, all of these things, they don't belong to you, guys. You don't own them. You get to be a steward of these things so that you can bear much fruit to bless the vineyard, to bless the people of God. Okay? Now, I know you're thinking, this is a weird Sunday to be in church. We already prayed for Ukraine. We talk about pornography. And now this is really uncomfortable message by Dave. It's very, very depressing today to be in church. And maybe you're saying, I'm just going to go home then and listen to Billie Eilish and be depressed for the rest of the Sunday. Like, oh my goodness. Well, here's the thing. Jesus did not just tell this story to make us feel uncomfortable. There is an uncomfortable side to this, how he unmasked our sense of entitlement, but he is also revealing some beautiful things here about God. So let's keep digging in the story. The second thing that Jesus uncovers is God's unwavering attempts of Persuasion? Close enough? Persuasion. Thank you. Hey, so God's unwavering attempts to persuade us. Okay, persuasion. I can say it. Persuasion, that's what it was. Yeah, okay. That's the second thing that Jesus is uncovering. And basically what I'm saying is the darker the darkness is in our hearts, our sense of entitlement and ownership, the darker that darkness is, the brighter his light actually comes and shines into our darkness. That's the beautiful thing. Now, in this story, I think what's so fascinating is that even though the farmers, the tenant farmers, they rebelled, they rejected, they resisted, they beat up the messengers, they killed some of the messengers, even though they did all that, God kept on sending messenger after messenger, servant after servant. He just would not give up on them. He just kept sending them. He kept pursuing them. He kept going after them. And that is unexpected. Because if I were the owner of that vineyard, and I would send one of my servants to bring in the percentage of the harvest that is rightfully mine, and he comes back beaten up and bruised and like, oh, they beat me up, and he comes back, as it says, empty-handed, what would I do? What would you do? We would call some of our guys, wouldn't we? We'd say, bring your weapons. We're going to go clean house. We're going to kick these guys out and start over with better tenants because clearly they don't know what they're doing. That's how we would respond. What is God doing? He kept sending another one. Kept sending another one. He kept going after them. And Jesus, what he's doing here, he's describing a God who just would not give up on us. A God who doesn't take no for an answer. A God who bends over backwards just to get to us. A God who's unbelievably committed, not just to the vineyard, but also to the farmers of the vineyard. And he has a love that will not let go. And only after every possible path of grace has been exhausted, he lets them face the consequences. There is judgment in this story. Yes, there is. At the end, they actually get killed. There is judgment that's coming. But not until the owner does everything in his power to try to reach them, to try to get to them, to try to call them to repentance, to turn their ways. And then the last final attempt that he has is, it says the owner sends his beloved son, thinking, surely they will listen to him. In 1 John chapter 4, it says, in this, the love of God was made manifest among us. You see that on the screen? In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his only son into the vineyard, into the world, so that we might live through him. And guys, the haunting thing about that story is that Jesus was telling the story to a group of leaders, and they were smart, and they realized what he was trying to say to them through the story. And they realized, it says, they knew that he was telling the story about them. And these leaders are standing in the vineyard, if you will, in Jerusalem, in the temple actually. They're standing in the vineyard in front of the son of the owner who came and who was sent to them. And he told them this story, predicting what was going to happen, uncovering the things, all the hidden schemes, the devious schemes in their hearts. And they were listening and they understood it, but still, just a few days later, they grabbed him. They beat him. They whipped him. They put a crown of thorns on his head and mocked him. It's like, ha, the king, right? And then they grabbed him and brought him out of the vineyard, out of the city, and they nailed his hands and his feet to a cross. And the thought that I just can't even bear is that as Jesus then was hanging on the cross, what was one of the last things that he was saying? He said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. I can't handle that thought that even though they were so cruel and so full of rejection and hate towards him, even in his final breath, he still pleads for them. What a God who just there's this this unwavering attempt to persuade them. Like, come on, don't do it. You don't need to do this. Now, the third thing that Jesus also uncovers here is God's unstoppable plan of salvation. God's unstoppable plan of salvation. In other words, he's saying here, the owner of the vineyard, he is sovereign, and there's really nothing that can stop him from accomplishing his purposes, from accomplishing his plan. He ends this parable, as I said, with this quote and this this play on words on sun and stone and ben and eben and all that. But he quotes Psalm 118 on the screen here as well. He says, the stone that the builders rejected has now become the cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing, and it is wonderful to see. And maybe you're saying, what does that mean? The stone has become the cornerstone. We need to understand that back then, there was a profession called the stonemasons. Is that a thing? Stonemasons maybe still exists, I don't know. But they were basically working in the mines and always inspecting the stones that they were uncovering in the mines. And they were on the lookout to find good, like well-formed stones that they said, oh, this can be used for a building as a foundational stone, so it can become the cornerstone. And if this is a good stone, the whole building will have a good foundation. And even if the earth shakes it, it will be all right because we have a good cornerstone. And so these stonemasons, all they did in the mines all day was, no, this isn't it. This isn't it. They were rejecting one stone after another. And every now and then they went, oh, aha, this is a good one. We can use this. We can sell this to someone building a house. Make sense? So what Jesus is saying here is the builders, they inspect, but they reject all the time. They're rejecting these stones. And he's saying, you guys, you're the leaders of Israel. You keep inspecting the scriptures, but you also just throw away. You keep rejecting one messenger after another, even the Son himself. But what Jesus is also saying is, you can reject, he's saying to them, you can reject the son of the owner like a stonemason rejects a stone and throws it to the side. But that will not change the fact that he is going to be the cornerstone of salvation, whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not. He's saying you can refuse him, but you will not delay him. You can beat him, but you cannot stop him. You can kill him, but you will not end him. And Jesus, what he's saying to them is, in other words, he's saying, your opposition to me is no obstruction to me. This is the Lord's doing here. And it's unstoppable. It is wonderful to see. And he's saying to them, you underestimate how committed God is to this vineyard. How much love he has in his heart for his people. You have no idea how committed he is. And that's why he will, in the end, will have no problem to replace you as leaders and entrust the vineyard to somebody else, he says. He's going to entrust the vineyard to somebody else. And for most theologians and Bible scholars, what that means, they see that already as an indicator that starting with the New Testament and the New Covenant, the story of God with his people continues beyond the people of Israel and will include all nations and all people and all generations. You see what that means? It means that's where you and that's where we come into the picture. That Jesus is saying, like, hey, even if you get this wrong, I am going to be the cornerstone and my plan will be fulfilled. And my plan is to open up the gates of this vineyard for anybody. I'm going to open up the gates to this vineyard for anybody. The band already can come up. Let me just land here and ask you, where do you think you fit into this strange parable that Jesus was sharing? Do you see yourself somewhere in this story? Maybe you're saying, God, like, if I'm honest, I'm probably like one of the farmers. Maybe not as brutal, but in my heart, I really I keep saying no to God. I'm rejecting this idea of this God who wants to have a say in my life. No, thank you very much. I don't want this God. You keep on rejecting him. You keep pushing him to the side. You're resisting this God. And you know that this God, he keeps coming to you and keeps knocking on your door and maybe even puts people in your path to come speak to you, but you don't want any of it because you're saying, I want to be the owner. I want to call the shots. I want to have the final say when it comes to my life and to my money and to my time and to my sexuality and my future. And no, I'm in charge. I'm not a steward of these things. I'm an owner of these things. And secretly, you're afraid of what it would look like to follow him instead of following your heart. Follow him instead of following your heart. But I want to say to you, Jesus, he keeps on persuading you. And he keeps on inviting you. And he says, hey, you can try to build your life and follow your ambitions and goals. And maybe that gets you somewhere, but you have no idea what kind of fruit is waiting for you in my vineyard. Come, the door is open. The door is open. Come, experience life to the full, abundant life in my vineyard. And Jesus is inviting you today. Maybe the way you fit into the story, and I think that's probably most of us, is not that you're saying, oh, I'm one of the farmers. Maybe the way you see yourself in that story is that you're saying, I'm one of the messengers. I'm actually one of the messengers. I love the owner of the vineyard. I've experienced his love, and I want to share him and his goodness with this world. But there are some people, maybe you have someone in your mind right now, there's some people in our lives, maybe a family member, a roommate, a co-worker, someone at your university, a neighbor, wherever. Someone in your life where you say, I keep on coming to them, and I keep on going after them, and I keep on knocking at their door, and I keep on sharing my story with them or the gospel with them. I'm trying to encourage them, show them my love practically, keep on inviting them to church, but again and again and again, it's like I'm speaking to a wall. They just say, no, not interested. Want to be my own owner. I'm not interested. And that can be frustrating, right? And it can be really hard, and you can identify with the pain and the shame of the messengers in this story who go home back to the owner, bruised and disappointed and frustrated. It's like, yes, you've tasted this frustration. It's like, God, I've tried. They said no again. They said no again. And you feel like you want to give up. But you know what I think the point of this story, of what Jesus is trying to say to us here is no matter how far you run from God, God keeps running after you. And that is true for the person that you're praying for the person that you care for in your life. No matter how far he has run from God, God keeps running after them. Psalm 23, the last verses says, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. You look what that literally says is, surely goodness and mercy will chase after me. There's no escape. His goodness, his mercy will chase after them all the days of their lives. That's how committed God is to them, and he calls us to do the same. So don't give up on that person. Keep on pointing them to the open door, that open gate of the vineyard. Let me pray for you, and then we'll sing. God, we thank you so much for this story that is actually a bit difficult to read and just uncomfortable to read because it's gory and quite exposing. And it's exposing some things about us that are, we need to just come to terms with how much there is a sense of entitlement deep within us, this pattern of entitlement that we just much more prefer to be owners instead of stewards. I pray that you would help us with this, help us to get our hearts right with this. Thank you for the other two things that this story also uncovers, is that you keep on persuading us and you don't give up on us. And Jesus, even on the cross, you prayed for those who executed you. What a God you are, that you're that committed and invested in us. And thank you also, we worship you for it, that you are sovereign God and that your plan of salvation is unstoppable, that what you purpose to do will come to pass. Thank you that there's this victory in this that should make us confident. So I pray for anybody here who maybe finds themselves more like a farmer, rejecting you. I pray that they would come to a place, that you would actually lead them gently to a place where they can learn to trust in your ways. They don't have to fear them. There's a whole much fuller life waiting for them there. And I pray for those of us who feel like the messengers, who feel frustrated, with how you maybe want to share your love with our friends, and it's just we just get a lot of rejection for it. Lord, I pray that you will help us to not give up, to get creative about it and find new ways, and give us your heart, give us your love for the people in our lives, so we can keep pursuing them. Yes, I pray this in your name, Jesus, and in faith. Amen.